Welcome back everybody to linuxacademy.com. My name is Terry, and in today's course we continue our preparation for the Linux Foundation Certified System Administration exam. In this video we're going to once again be talking about software installation and package management, although in this case we're going to be talking about it from the eyes of Red Hat or CentOS based distributions, i.e. those distributions that rely on the Red Hat package management system. So if you are using a Debian or Ubuntu based distribution, we have a video on that as well where we talk about the appropriate package management tools and installation types, but this one is for CentOS / Red Hat based systems. So there are two methods for installing packages. The two that you'll hear are the RPM command, and the RPM command stands for Red Hat Package Manager. And you can install packages from the Red Hat Package Management command if you have a .rpm file. One of the limitations of using the RPM file to install a package is that if the dependencies that file exists or depends upon are not already installed, the installation will fail, but it will give you an indication of what those packages were. Conversely, with the Yum package management system, and Yum has been purported to mean a number of things. Yum has been purported to stand for yet another package manager, but it really is actually the Yellow Dog updater. It was used for Yellow Dog Linux for a long time, and it has been co-opted for RPM-based package systems like CentOS and Red Hat. So Yum is something that you'll want to run the first time you log into your CentOS or Red Hat system. In our case, we are running a CentOS 7 based system, and the first thing that we want to do is we're going to do a Yum update. However, unlike if you've seen our video in apt-get, where the update and upgrade process were two different processes, although both the update and upgrade command are part of the options that are available for Yum, they both do the same thing, meaning they update the repositories, they synchronize them from a cache perspective, and they update the system for anything that needs updating. So if we run an update here, it's going to go out for the update repositories to synchronize those repositories and all of the mirrors that we happen to be installing, which we'll take a look at in a few moments. And it'll update any packages. In this case, we don't need to update any packages on our system, so it's completed its update. So for example, let's take a look at the package, for example, for OpenSSH. So I can list information about the SSH package by doing a Yum list. So for example, if I do a Yum list on OpenSSH server, then I should get information returned from the repositories that tell me that the package is installed and the particular version that it's running on. In this case, it happens to be running version 6.6.1. So I get the fact that it is a 64-bit version, which I obviously am on a 64-bit OS, as well as being version 6.6 on our system, and it will accept updates, meaning I haven't configured the system to ignore updates for this particular package. Now, much like I can search using apt-get in Debian systems, I can also search for particular packages using Yum. So if I want to search for a package, I can do a Yum and a search, and in this case, let's do a search for Nmap. Now, if Nmap is available in any of the configured repositories, I will get matches back as well as version information. And again, I caution you just so that you know that it'll return information about packages that either have Nmap in the package name or in the description or both. So the more specific you are when searching for a package, the more pertinent information you'll get. So now that I've searched for the Nmap package, if I clear this, now I can use the installation utility called install. So I can do a Yum install on Nmap, and you'll see that it's going to ask me a question. Do I want to install this and all of the dependencies that are necessary for Nmap to operate? In this case, I'm going to say no, and the reason that I said no is because now what I want to do is a yum install -y for Nmap. And then that tells the system, don't bother to ask me whether I want everything installed, just go ahead and do it. Now that Nmap is installed, I can get further information about the package. I can information that we've seen in the past when we were looking, for example, at the aptitude tool in Debian and Ubuntu. It gives us information about the package, the architecture, the version, a description, the URL where it's downloaded, because packages as a generic concept will have the same information in their headers, meaning it'll have information like the name and the architecture, the release, the size, etc., much like a Debian package will. Yum just happens to read this for us so that it displays it. What I want to do is I want to take a second to install a particular set of utilities for Yum where it will allow us to download just the packages rather than installing them. So we're going to do a yum install -y on yum-utilities. And this will give us access to a application called Yum Downloader. So for example, if I want to install the Xterm package, or to download the Xterm package, I could do a yum downloader on the Xterm package, for example. And then you'll see that it only downloads the RPM that's necessary to install the file. And the reason that I may want to do that is I may just want the RPM because I have to package it up. I need to install it on multiple systems. I may just want the RPM, and it's a lot easier than going to the repository sites and downloading it itself. Let's also go ahead and download theLedit package. And there's noLedit package, so we'll just work with the Xterm package. And the reason that we'll want to do that again is because we want to talk about information that is within the packages themselves. So in my Yum utility, I can also get a list of all of the packages that are available in the Yum database. So if I do a Yum list more, I can get an entire set of utilities that are available. And if I have a question about whether something is available, I can grep for Nmap. So this is a way to get the same information that I get if I do a Yum search. So again, if I do a Yum search on Nmap, then we see that these three packages that we've listed as part of our Yum list also match the searched packages that we have returned. So there's two ways of doing it. But if I want to get a list of just what's installed on my system, then I can do a yum list on installed, and this will tell me what I've currently got on my system. So again, if I want to know is the cron package installed on my system, I can do a yum list installed, and then I can grep for cron. And that'll tell me I have matching the cron text that I gave, crony, anacron, and cron tabs. Again, the more text that you give, then the more accurate your information will be available. Now, one of the other things that we can do, rather than doing a yum update or yum upgrade, if we just want to see if anything on our system needs an update, we can do a yum check update. And all this is going to do is do that initial validation to determine whether there are things in our system that need updates. In this case, we obviously don't have anything that, and if you remember, when we ran update at the very beginning, it said no packages were available for update. One of the cool things that Yum does is it sometimes packages more than just a single application in a file. And if you want to look at what they call groups, so you can have a list of groups that contain a large number of packages so that you don't have to install them one at a time. So for example, if I want to know what groups are available for my system, I can say yum group list, and it'll tell me that I've got minimal installed, compute node, infrastructure server, console internet tools, development tools, and I can install any of those as a large group by executing the appropriate install. So if I wanted to do a minimal install or a compute node, I would do a yum group install, and then in single quotations, I would say, in this case, compute node. Now, I don't want to install this because that particular group may vastly change the configuration of my system because it's an environment. Although, what I could do is I could install the GNOME desktop, KDE Plasma workspaces, the server with the GUI, that would allow me to install all of the applications that are necessary for that entire group of packages without individually installing them. And then I can do a group update for those packages if I need to, including a group remove. So I have the same kind of information available. So as I've got a yum install and a yum remove for my individual packages, I've got a yum group install, a yum group remove, and group update that are available for the groups that are installed on the system. When we talked about repositories, we've got enabled yum repositories on our system that are synchronized back and forth between the repos that they represent and the cache available on our system. If we want to see what's enabled on our system, we just do a yum repo list, and it will tell us everything that's available on our system from a repository standpoint. We can also list everything, whether it's disabled or enabled, by doing a yum repo list all. In that particular, it'll tell us that we've got, for example, these repositories are disabled, whereas only these three, which should match the list up here, are enabled. And the reason we might want to do that is there are some times where we may want to install a package or an application from a particular repository, even if it happens to be disabled. And if we want to enable any of those particular repositories, we just do a yum -- enable repo, and then the name of the repo that we want to enable, which is this right here, the name right here, and then the package that we want to install. So install and then package name. And that would install whatever happens to be available from that repo, regardless of whether it's in the normal available repos for us as well. Finally, much like the cache clean that we can do from an apt-get perspective, we can also do a yum clean all, which will clean up the list of mirrors as well as packages that we've downloaded. And if we want to look at what we've done from a yum perspective, we can also look at yum history, and it'll tell us everything that we've run from within this. We've done a particular user has done an installation, an IU, etc., etc. So we can tell what's been done on our system. Now, we've downloaded this RPM file, and we haven't talked about how to install through an RPM package management system. So just using RPM, we can install the package by passing an appropriate set of parameters. However, what we might want to do is we might want to check the dependencies of an RPM package before installing it. So the RPM command is issued with just RPM. And in our case, what we want to do is we want to query the package dependencies for this xterm package that we have in our directory. And unlike when you're using yum, where you can just say xterm, in this case, we're going to do the specific package xterm because it's reading the RPM. It's not reading it from a repository or a package list. So in this case, it will show us everything that's necessary, files, directories, and libraries that are necessary in order to install that particular package. If we think that we might need to download libc or libxft, etc., we could do that directly with that particular version and download and install them prior to the RPM install. Now, there are two ways to install a package that isn't already on the system. The first way is the strict information, or the strict installation method, which is -ivh. Installation verbose of our particular package. Now, I tend to use UVH rather than IVH, and even though that stands for update, if the package doesn't exist, the update command will install it. If the package does exist, it will update the package with the package name that I'm trying to run. So for example, if I've got an earlier version of the Xterm package and I say UVH, I'm telling it if it exists and it's an older version and you can upgrade it, do so. Whereas an IVH, if the application is already installed, regardless of the version, it'll fail because the application's already installed. So this is just a more flexible way for me to get the command to run. Now remember how we talked about before though, very much like if we are using the dpackage command in Debian Ubuntu systems, RPM does not install dependencies that are necessary for that particular Red Hat package manager file to run. In this case, we happen to be failing the dependencies for libxaw and libxpm. So the RPM command is going to fail. Now I could fix that by simply doing a yum install xterm, and if we do, we can do a yum install xterm, and I didn't pass -y because I just want to show what this will do. It's going to say, hey, I've got these dependencies, XAW and XPM for xterm. Do you want me to go ahead and install them along with xterm? In which case, in this case, I'm going to say no. I can also determine whether a particular package is installed using RPM by just doing an RPM-Q, and I can say, well, is xterm already installed? Well, no, it's not installed. Well, is cron already installed? Cron is not installed. But what I know is installed, for example, is Open SSH Server, because that's how we're logged in. And it'll tell me the particular version of Open SSH Server that I have logged into my system. Now, if I want to view a list of all the files of an installed RPM package, something that's already installed, so OpenSSH Server is a good example. Much like I did in Yum, I can do an RPM-QL and query list. So I'm going to list the files for our OpenSSH server. And it tells us all the files, directories, etc. that are necessary for that particular system. If I want to know what RPM packages have recently been installed, I can do an RPM -QA or -QA. It's going to simply query everything on my system, and I can say --last, which will tell me the last packages, or I could just do an RPM-QA and it'll tell me every package that's been installed on the system. And again, we talked about how to upgrade, so if we want to remove a package, we're going to use the package name, not the original package name that's under the RPM. So for example, I would want to do an RPM-EVV, which is going to give me verbose output for, let's go ahead and install Yum. So let's do a yum install nmap. Oh, nmap is already installed, so go ahead. That'll make it convenient. RPM-EVV in nmap. And although, unlike when I install a package that I have the RPM for, if I'm going to remove a package, I use the package name, not the entire RPM file. So in this case, I've now uninstalled nmap from the system and the command is no longer found. I tend to use RPM when I want to work with individual package files, and I use yum for everything else, because then I only have to remember the commands for each one, and each one kind of specifies what's necessary, and it has different types of tools that are available for it. Finally, for RPM, before we go through and wrap up, we're going to query the documentation that may be installed in my RPM package. So if I look at the RPM package that I have RPM for xterm, I can query the documentation that's available in a particular directory for a particular file. So for example, user bin, and xterm isn't installed, so let's look at vmstat. All the documentation that mentions or pertains to vmstat, for example, is contained in those man and those doc pages. And that's good information to know, so that if, for example, if I wanted to know that what dependencies vmstat have where I might look at documentation. I know that vmstat is mentioned in free, so I might be able to go man free and then find out where it mentions vmstat. In this case, it also is simply a pointer to the vmstat man page. But I at least get that documentation dependency that exists between those items. I can verify all of the RPMs on my system by simply doing a RPM-VA, and that will tell me that all of the RPMs are verified. And in this case, you'll see that run GDM is missing its verification key, but it'll go through a whole bunch of other ones on a system and directory by directory basis. I'm going to go ahead and stop that here. And in order to fix certain things, we can import keys. We would download a key from a particular repository or package, and we would do an RPM -import. And if we want to list all of the keys that have been imported on our system, we'll do a -QA, and then we'll do a GPG -pub key and a star at the end, which should tell me all of the public keys that are available on our system. So -QA and pub key. So right now the only pub key we have is that one right there, and it should be something that we've imported onto the system. Finally, if we've got a message from RPM when we go to install something that tells us that the RPM database has been corrupted, we can fix that generally by going to the var-lib directory, and we have a whole bunch of stuff here. We can remove DB directories and do an RPM --rebuild DB. So if we do RPM -rebuild DB, then it will rebuild our RPM database. Finally, again, back to our xterm package, if we do a yum install on xterm, we can get those particular packages installed, and then we can do a yum remove xterm, and it will only remove the xterm packages. So now I should have the dependencies that are necessary to RPM-UVH on the xterm application, and you'll see that it doesn't complain about missing package dependencies, because when I removed the xterm package, I didn't remove its dependencies. I would have had to purge those, as we talked about earlier. So RPM and yum have their very specific uses. RPM, again, is used for mainly dealing with individual package files rather than broader groups or packages that may have multiple dependencies. And yum is a powerful tool for managing everything that's on your system, as well as installing and updating it. For software installations on our system using yum for Red Hat and CentOS based systems, that's all there is to it. My name is Terry for Linux Academy.